Hi, welcome to YTV and this week's segment of Everybody Has a Story. In 1994, Sir Gilbert Levine was dubbed Knight Commander with Silver Star of the Pontifical Equestrian Order of St. Gregory the Great. It was the highest pontifical knighthood given to a non-ecclesiastical musician since Mozart, and one of the many honors Pope John Paul II would bestow upon him. Over the course of nearly 2 decades of friendship, Sir Gilbert Levine became known simply as the Pope's maestro, and he joins us today. Sir Gilbert Levine, thanks so much for being here.
It's a pleasure to be with you.
So you're at Yale rehearsing for a concert, I understand, on the 22nd, and from what I hear, it involves President Salve. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
It's terrific. We'll be doing, the major work on the program is the Mahler Second Symphony, but we'll be beginning the program with Richard Daniel Poor's Washington Speaks. And there's a real Yale story to Washington Speaks, because it sets the texts of Washington to various to various religious denominations, including the Jewish congregation of Newport, Rhode Island, on the theme of religious liberty. And there's a Yale story to it, because Ezra Stiles, when he was president of Yale, befriended the rabbi who was in Newport. Just before, in fact, that letter was written to the Touro Synagogue congregation. So there's a connection between Yale. There's a reason, for instance, that the first valedictories at Yale were given in Hebrew under Ezra Stiles, because of the influence of that rabbi. And Washington wrote that letter, which is set by Richard Daniel Poor in Washington Speaks. And so now we have the president of Yale, Peter Salovey, who comes from a family of great rabbis, the Soloveitchik rabbis, and is president of Yale, reciting the words of Washington written to this congregation in Newport. So over the centuries, there's a wonderful Yale connection to this piece. It's an honor to have President Salovey reciting those words with the Yale Symphony on the occasion of this concert.
And how has it been working with the Yale Symphony
It's
Orchestra?
wonderful. I can't believe they're an undergraduate orchestra. I've told Toshi Shimada this on many, many occasions. They just play wonderfully. They're responsive, they are disciplined, they're incredibly musical. The Mahler is a gargantuan work. It's difficult for any orchestra, and they've done a remarkable job of preparing for it. I have a special affection for the first bassoon, I have to tell you. He's my son, Gabriel, Trumbull, class of 2014. And it's one of the privileges of my life, really, to make music with my son as part of the orchestra. But I find working with them just musically enriching and a lot of fun. It's really wonderful.
Talk about a Yale connection with President Salovey and with your son, but you also have a Yale connection on this stage. We're here in Woolsey Hall. Your career started on this stage a long time ago.
I came to Yale to get a master's in 1971, and I don't know on exactly what purpose, but Leopold Stokowski, one of the greatest conductors of the 20th century, came to Yale. Maybe he got an honorary degree, maybe he was honored by the School of Music, I'm not sure. But I prepared with the Yale Philharmonia the Beethoven 7th Symphony on this stage of Woolsey Hall with the Yale Philharmonia. And I worked and worked and worked. And Stokowski arrived at that door out there in a limousine and stepped out of the door. He was maybe 90 years old, maybe just shy of 90. And he was, for all intents and purposes, non compos mentis when he got out of the car. I don't think he knew where he was. He was led out of the car by his assistant, led up the stairs to just right off there, and walked onto this podium. And everyone looked at him, this incredibly frail man. And he stood up on the podium, and it was as if somebody plugged in a light. He came alive and did the most astonishing performance of Beethoven 7th that I've ever heard in terms of night and day, with incredible vigor, incredible conviction. And then the performance ended, and it was like somebody shut off the light. And he walked back off. I've never seen anything like it. It was an inspiration for me about what a conductor can do to an orchestra, with an orchestra, to get them to play remarkably. And it's one of the great experiences I've had musically. And it was right on this stage, so it's a wonderful connection for me.
Well, let's continue to go through that career. You have probably one of the coolest titles of any musician around, and I want to repeat this. We said this already, but the Knight Commander with Silver Star of the Pontifical Equestrian Order of St. Gregory the Great. Now, how does a nice Jewish boy, as you call yourself, go from Brooklyn to the Vatican?
I guess it was 1986. I was conducting really incredible orchestras, the Philadelphia Orchestra, the San Francisco Symphony, Hamburg, Paris, all over the world. And I got an invitation through Krzysztof Penderecki, who has been a professor here and was a professor at Yale, to come to the Krakow Philharmonic. And my family comes from Warsaw, from Poland, not from Krakow, but from Poland. And we have, through my wife's family, a very strong Holocaust connection. We lost 40 members of our family in the Holocaust. So something drew me there. I didn't go for the money. There was no money to be made there. It was just for the music making and for the culture. And I went there and spent a week conducting there. And at the end of that week, Penderecki came up to me and said, "How would you like to be music director here?" And I had just been offered a major orchestra in the United States. And it was very, very strange. But something made me say yes. And I said yes to going to the Krakow Philharmonic. I began that job, took up the position in December of 1987. 5 days after I arrived, I was invited to meet Cardinal Maharski, the Archbishop of Krakow. The Pope had left Krakow, of course, 10 years before, in 1978, and this was just on the cusp of 1988. And his successor as Archbishop of Krakow was Cardinal Maharski. I'd never met a Catholic priest before.
Never?
Never. Not a parish priest, nobody. I'd never had occasion to. And I was invited to meet the Cardinal Archbishop of Krakow. And over the course of a half an hour of rambling conversation, he said, "You must tell all you have told to me to the Holy Father." I had no idea who he was talking about. I had no idea. Of course. And I went home for my holiday break and came back, and there was an envelope on my desk. "You will be free in the first week in February. You will go to Rome, and you will call the following priest." Didn't say I was going to see the Pope. Just said, "Go to Rome." And I called someone I knew, and I said, "Well, what's this about?" "Well, I don't know, really, but you should go." And I went, and the second priest I met was the private secretary of the Pope in the Apostolic Palace, who said, basically, "What are you doing tomorrow?" And I said, "Well, I'm here." He said, "Well, come back here at 12:30. And I went back the next day, and I had been told, between the time I went to Rome and the time I went back that next day, that what it would probably be would be that I would be in a line, and the Pope would come by, and I would be blessed by the Pope and have a picture taken with him and have a wonderful experience for a lifetime, because I had met the Pope for 20 seconds.
You didn't think this was going to be a private meeting?
Oh, absolutely not. In fact, I was told not to prepare anything I shouldn't open my mouth. The Pope would say, bless you," and that would be the end of the story. Instead of that, I was ushered into the private library of the Pope, and there was no one else in the room. This was astonishing. This is a kind of an audience, not even presidents of the United States have it, because they always want note takers. They always want people with them to know what the Pope said and what the president said, so there were always people present. I was alone with the Pope, and the Pope and I had this astonishing conversation, like between two people who were from Krakow, except he had spent his life there, and I had only spent, by that time, 2 months there. And it began a relationship that every single day of which, for 17 years, I thought would end with the next day, because it was so preposterous. And what came out of it was that he invited me to conduct the concert to commemorate his 10th anniversary as Pope in December of 1988. All Catholic music. I'd never conducted a Mass in my life. I conducted the first Mass I ever did in the Vatican for the Pope. And then, over the course of the next 3 years, it became clear what this was about. And the Pope, I think, having lived through the Holocaust, having had many Jewish friends who were murdered by the Nazis, wanted to find a way to reach out to the Jewish people, to reach out to Muslims, to reach out to people of other faiths, to try and form a world in which people would be judged by their character, by who they were, and not by their religion, and not judged by that. And I felt very, very strongly that as he became more convinced that music could be the language that he could use. So it was, he wanted to reach out, but he didn't know what language to use.
Why do you think he chose music? I mean, in 1994...
I think he chose music because of me. In other words, I think he came to know, through knowing a musician, that music could conceivably have the power to transcend words, to be a bridge between peoples. He was looking for that bridge. I didn't introduce the idea of looking for the bridge, but he thought that music could be, as he called it, the way in which people of different faiths could find a common language, a common way to come together around the notion of tolerance, mutual respect, and brotherly love. And that's what really, fundamentally, the relationship was about.
He called Jews his brothers.
He called Jews his elder brothers in faith. Over the course of the 17 years that I worked with him, he never once suggested that I convert. Honored my Jewish faith, our Jewish faith, asked about my sons, David and Gabriel, my wife, my mother-in-law. His relationship with my mother-in-law was astonishing, a Holocaust survivor. Astonishing. I went to him in 1991 and talked to him about a concert I was doing in a synagogue in Krakow. A concert of tolerance and mutual respect in Krakow. And he became fascinated by the concert. He talked to me about it in the Vatican as if it were vital to him. And out of that came the idea for the papal concert to commemorate the Shoah, and he called it the Shoah. He called it by its Hebrew name, so that no one in the world would have any doubt whatsoever about what the concert was about. And during the course of that, he came to know my mother-in-law, who had lost all these relatives and been decimated, had this incredible pall over herself. And he found a way to show her that someone extraordinarily important was listening and could actually heal her.
Now you conducted that concert, which was a huge deal in Jewish Catholic relations in 1994. You know, you were the director of the Philharmonic in Krakow. How much effect do you think the place has on how you conduct? You know, with the history or the culture of both Krakow and the Vatican?
I think it's enormous. I think the sense of history, you can't imagine, I couldn't imagine. I conducted some of the greatest orchestras in the world in some of the greatest repertoire. You step out on the stage of the Vatican and you realize that this concert will be seen not by 7,500 people who are in the hall, but by millions and millions of people, and not just by millions of people, but by the presence of I had suggested that I would organize in Rome a concert to commemorate the Shoah, and I wanted to invite the Pope. That's what I felt I could do. He said, no, let's hold it in the Vatican. By having it in the Vatican, in that historic place, by his attending, but not only attending, but hosting those survivors, it took on a meaning that was incredible. And the music we did, I mean, the Royal Philharmonic from London came, and they told me they had never participated in a concert like that. And they've performed all over the world, including on this stage. It was incredible the way in which the place, it's a great question, because the place, the occasion, made everything nobler, more important, and it did exactly what the Pope wanted, which was to bring the message of unity into this language of music that everyone in that hall, everyone watching on television, it was front page news all over the world. He knew it. He knew that if he brought it into the Vatican, and if it could be successful, that it would change Catholic-Jewish relations, and it did.
And do you think that message continues today?
I think it fundamentally changed. When I went into synagogues before, and people knew that I had a relationship with that Polish Pope, they looked at me very oddly. Why are you doing that? Afterwards, immediately afterwards, when that concert took place, people said, oh, now I understand. What a wonderful mitzvah, what a wonderful gesture this is, a blessing that this Pope has taken us in as brothers, that he has shown us the love he has. And music was the language that made it possible. If he had issued an encyclical, it would have been read by Vatican scholars. It would have been read by 3 or 4 rabbis. By doing a concert, by understanding that my art was something he could use for that incredible purpose, he reached people literally around the world. It was a seminal event that changed things from before and after.
Now you talk about performing not just in front of the people in the room, but thousands of people on television, millions of people on television. What is different? Is there something that's lost when that classical music is translated to the screen if you're not, here in Wolsey Hall or in the Vatican?
Depends upon how you do the television. If the television is done using the medium of television well, and I've done now 16 concerts worldwide for television, if you use the medium as it's intended to be used, as an added vision, as an added element in how people perceive what's there, it's a great tool. It's an unbelievably effective tool. If I do a concert for PBS, I'm just about to do my 11th, I think, for PBS. Instead of the 2,500 people in the hall, there are millions of people all over America who will see that, and all over the world who will see that concert, experience the music in a communal way, in a very palpable way. I think it's a medium that is very, very well suited to television if it's used properly.
Now, it's no secret that classical music isn't as popular among my generation, among your son's generation, and there have been some conductors and directors of philharmonics who have said that something needs to change. If these orchestras are gonna survive, something needs to change about the way they're conducted. Do you agree with that? I mean, what is the future of orchestral music?
I call it back to the future. The reason that concerts were more popular in the 1960s, 70s, and 80s was that people walked on the stage and they had this incredible sense, wow, I'm doing something very important. I feel that when I walked on the stage of the Yale Symphony. These kids, they love what they're doing. If you bring a love of music and they project a love of music, every single person in that audience will feel it. If you walk out and it's just another professional engagement, it won't work. So we have the responsibility, we as artists, to be engaged in the music we make, to make it new, not to make it the next iteration of the Beethoven Eroica, but something new, something that brings Beethoven to life. What I said tonight on the stage was, think of Mahler as one of the greatest artists of his time, giving you an image of what life was like in Vienna at the time this was written. And it comes alive in a way that's astonishing. I don't believe we have to change the programming. I don't believe we have to dumb things down. I believe that what we have to do is liven things up again so that our performances are really compelling.
Now, we end all of our interviews with a speed round. These are just a couple fun, quick questions. So the first one is, favorite piece to conduct?
Beethoven Eroica.
One piece of advice you would give to Pope Francis?
Oh, I think there's no advice to give him. I think he's great. I think he is, if John Paul is looking down, he's smiling at Pope Francis, at the openness to all people that he showed. It's not a one-word answer, but I have enormous regard for Pope Francis.
Last one, place in the world where you'd love to conduct, but you haven't yet had the opportunity.
The Musikverein in Vienna. Absolutely. And the Vienna Philharmonic in Eroica. That would be something. But you know, I've conducted in so many wonderful places. And I've gotten to make music with so many terrific orchestras. And music is, as John Paul understood, as so many have understood, a universal language. And I think it's proved by the Yale Symphony. I think these kids who come from so many different backgrounds, some of whom want to be professional musicians, many who don't, coming onto the stage, being wrapped up in Mahler's Second Symphony, which is also one of my favorite pieces, by the way, is just proof that this art is alive and well, and that we are in for a great future, not just a great past for classical music.
We could just do one more favorite moment from Pope John Paul. I know there are so many, but he seemed to have a pretty good sense of humor.
After the very first rehearsal of the first concert in the Vatican, two moments I have to tell you about. One is I was called to meet him after the first rehearsal, and I was all sweaty, and they brought me some clothes, and I went up, and I had no idea why I was going to see him, because I was going to see him at the concert that night. Comes over to me conspiratorially, puts his arm around me and says, have you had enough rehearsal time? I said, excuse me, Your Holiness? He said, I heard the Pope is coming. It's a very important concert. Have you had enough rehearsal time? That was the first. The second was at World Youth Day in Denver. I'm conducting this big orchestra, and it had been arranged that I had to switch two numbers, and I didn't know why I was switching two numbers, and I was conducting, and then first the basses stopped looking at me, then the cello stopped looking at me, then the violas, and finally the concertmaster goes, look back, and the Pope was standing behind me imitating my gestures. Then he comes over, puts his arm around me, and says, did I disturb you, maestro? That's John Paul.
Well, it's an amazing story, and thank you so much for sharing it with us, Sir Gilbert Levine. Good luck with the concert.
A pleasure. Thanks so much.
And as always, thank you for joining us. For YTV, I'm Cody Pomeranz, and this has been Everybody Has a Story. See you next time.